Alright, so now let's turn our attention to the hand. Let's start off with a basic cube. So let's just draw this out. Now this initial shape is going to give us this is really going to be the palm. We're going to just put that into place. I'm going to cut this up along that edge. I'm going to do that in a uniform cut set to 3. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 different polygons. Okay, and so these are going to be the start of our fingers. I'm going to select those individual edges and we're going to bevel those out. Okay, in that bevel, this space, these new polygons that we created, those are going to be the spaces in between the fingers. Okay, and that's going to be really important in terms of topology. I'm just going to even those out so these are a little bit more square, and I can tell that this one and this one need to come in a little bit to scale that back in. Something like that. Okay, that's good. Now I'm going to cut this up across here because these are n-gons, okay, and we don't want those right now, so let's cut that across here and change those n-gons to quads. So just hit the C key for our cut tool and then click on those lines, and you see that the edge will pre-highlight, or the point, and I typically will just find that edge and then drag it to where I want. That's good. Okay, so now what we want to do is we need a little bit more divisions around here. So let's do Alt-C again. Uniform slice around here, uniform cut rather. We're going to cut it this way, and we're going to cut it this way, all just down the line. Okay, so we're in good shape to bevel out some fingers. Now we're not going to bevel all of them out. We're just going to use one. We're going to build one, and then we're going to copy and paste that for the others. Just resize them. Alright, so select those end polygons, hit B for bevel, and then just pull the handle out. And again, we can sort of adjust this as we go, but just sort of approximate what that's going to look like, how far it's going to be. And then it's going to have a taper, so it's going to be tapered down at the end a little bit versus the origin. Alright, so that looks good. Let's go ahead and cut our divisions in here. So we want to go Alt-C. We can set this to, yeah, we'll just keep it at uniform. So 2 cuts gives us 3 spans. So 1, 2, 3, and this is going to be where the fingers are going to bend. So those are the joints. Now we can work on sort of shaping this into place. Select that point at the end, just sort of move that out. Sort of move these out just slightly. And then we'll do the same with these. Move those out just a little bit. So we're at a good start. Select those points. Maybe move those back. So hit the W key and just sort of move those back. Something like that. Now let's select each of those joints. And I might want to round this off a little bit more. I'm just going to hold off. Round this top part just a little bit. That'll make me feel a little better about the overall shape and volume. Alright, so I rounded that a little bit, and I can do the same on the bottom. W key. Okay, that's kind of a better starting point. I know that's going to be rounded. Alright, so come back to these joints. So let's double click those. And I'm going to bevel these out because I want some spans right here. Let's just say the edge shape is going to be round, and the round level is going to be 2. Click and drag. Let's just pull these out. Something about like that. what that does is that leaves the middle one. Okay, and that's going to be kind of the bend area, and then we have some supporting edges along there. I don't want her fingers to be real knobby, so I'm going to be real sensitive to this taper. Okay, so I don't want to push and pull too much to make her fingers a little bit bumpy. All right, I want to keep that as smooth as possible to start with. All right, so with the Sculpt Move tool, I'm just going to start to work on the joint here on the top, just to establish a little bit of, just going to spread that out a little bit. Do that for both of them. Then turn it to the side. I'm just going to bring that knuckle up just slightly. Okay, let's go to the bottom, and I want to bring these in a little bit. So just sort of work back and forth a little bit. Don't get it too tight. You can always tighten it up later, but just sort of bring those in. All right, we'll bring these in. You see I'm working left and right on this. Okay, and let's grab that middle, those middle two areas right there, those middle two edges, and then let's just push those in. Okay, just a little bit, just to cause a little bit of an indentation there. All right, so you hit tab, you can see what we're doing. Okay, we're just creating a little bit of an indentation there where it would naturally bend. Okay, so let's move these back out a little bit to soften that just a touch. We'll keep that pretty tight in the middle, or fairly tight. We can loosen it up or keep it like it is as we go. Maybe a little bit looser. Okay. So something like that. All right, that's looking good. Just going to add a loop slice into here. So Alt-C. Just going to set this to free. Let's see, 1 span. And just sort of bring that down about there. Sort of maybe where the nail is going to start. Sort of pull that back, even that out a little bit. And then just sort of work your way around here to accentuate this taper effect, this taper. And I might want to pull these knuckles out just slightly right there. So a little goes a long way with those knuckles. All right, again, you don't want them too knobby. So just sort of work back and forth between the raw polygon mode and the subdivision surfaces mode by hitting tab, just so you can sort of preview the work that you're doing. Okay, and that's a pretty good starting point. Probably fill that out a little bit more as we go. Let's add one more loop slice into here. So Alt-C, and this is going to come close to the base. That's going to help hold that geometry right there. See how that tightens up pretty nicely? Okay, so now I'm going to cut this out, and we're going to pull these over to populate the spaces for the other fingers. So I think first, though, what I want to do is to create sort of an hourglass shape in this negative space between the fingers first. Okay, so let's do that. So select your Move tool, and it's just going to sort of create this hourglass shape. Negative space is really as important as the actual fingers themselves. So we don't have to shape this too much. We're gonna maybe just a little bit. we'll certainly massage all these points once we get there. Okay. And then maybe pull that edge down a little bit. Round that out just a touch. So let's select those in polygons and then shift up arrow. We're going to grow that selection. And we're going to grab those. We're going to copy those. Hit N for a new mesh layer. And we're going to paste that geometry in there. All right, so let's just move that over. We can move that over to the ring finger. And the ring finger and the index finger are going to be the same size, so that's good. Go ahead and select those, delete them, grab that, copy, new mesh layer, and then paste. And then we'll pull this over to the middle finger. Just sort of position it like that. I'm going to go to a top view. Let me just maximize this. So I want the ring finger to be longer, but I want to stretch this out in sort of a uniform way. So I'm going to use a fall off for that. So select my linear fall off and just click. I want to influence this area down here. I'm comfortable with the position of the first joint to the end of the finger. It's a really small thing, but this fall off is going to allow more of a pull down this way, you see. So I'm just going to pull that out just a touch. Escape to clear the fall off, and then W for the move tool, and then just sort of reposition that. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Let's come back to a perspective view, and we'll select that mesh of the ring finger again. So copy that, new mesh layer, and then paste. You don't have to put it into a new mesh layer, but sometimes I like to work like that just to keep things a little bit more organized. Just like we made this middle finger longer, we're going to make this pinky finger shorter. We're going to do that also with a fall off. Drag out your fall off. This time I don't care about the size of the nail. It's going to be smaller, the size of the joint between the knuckle and the tip of the finger. I can just scale that all down like that, and we just sort of eyeball it. Escape to clear the fall off, and let's go back to a perspective view. So we can take all these guys and sort of merge them together, but before we do that, I want to delete our starter shapes on that base mesh first. So select those polys, hit delete. Now we're in good shape to put these other fingers together. So I'm going to select those guys, going to right click, and I'm going to, where are you? Merge meshes. I like that new feature. Alright, so now all the geometry is in the same layer. And I'm going to use the bridge tool to connect this edge with that edge. Alright, so bridge, click, double click those, here and there. Okay, so now we're in pretty good shape. We just need to do some tweaking. Maybe that's a little bit lumpy. Just scale that down a little bit. Something like that. Let's go to a top view, and I want to fan these fingers out a little bit. I'm going to shift up arrow to grab all the polygons up to there. Let me go down one, shift down arrow, and I'm just going to move that out slightly to even that area out. Shift up arrow, and then with an automatic action center, we're going to, with the automatic action center, you can click anywhere and it realigns the tool. So let's just flare this out just a touch. Alright, let's grab these polygons on the ring finger. Same sort of thing, clicking right there. Let's skip the middle finger, grab those, and then just sort of bring that out. Something like that. That's a good start to the hand. Next, we're going to work on the thumb. So we need to put in some geometry right there. And we can start with a couple of slices. Say maybe in a uniform way, something like that. Might want to change that, but I'm going to grab these guys and I'm just going to scale those in. That's going to indicate to me that that's going to be where the wrist is. I might even want to bevel that out just slightly, just kind of as a placeholder. The end of the palm the fingers came out of. Well, if you pull the thumb out of here, it might look a little weird. So what we're going to do is we're going to bevel out from this corner. Okay, so 2 polygons up here, say 2 polygons down there. Actually, I probably want to put another span in right here. So let me just select that, and I'm just going to bevel that. So I'm going to bevel that out. I'm going to lower my round level to 0. Okay, so now I've got, let's see, 3 polygons up here. 2, 3, 4. I want to do one more. So I'm actually going to take those and delete. And Alt-C with uniform. So 3, all right, because I want this to be even. So 4 this way, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 this way. Okay. Now it's a little different, but I think it's going to work for us. All right, so we're just going to hit B for bevel. I'm going to bevel that out to start our shape. I'm going to drop the tool, and then with the selection action center, I'm going to hit the Y key. I'm just going to flatten those out a little bit. Now you see over here it has negative scale. If you keep negative scale on, it does what it's told, but I want to turn that off, so I just want that to be basically flat. Okay, so I'm just going to pull this out, and I'm going to scale it down a little bit. This is going to be the start of our thumb. Okay, so the thumb, if you look in the drawings, now we're not obviously working right on top of the drawings, it's just we're able to see it. It comes down a little bit, so we want to sort of approximate that angle. Something like that. Shift X with those polygons selected is the extrude tool. We're going to pull that out a little bit, and let's scale that down. Okay, something small like that. It's going to be the tip of our thumb. And let's just scale this down a little bit. Okay, something like that. So we've got some polygons around here which are a loop. So if you hit L, you get a loop. So that's going to be really important in terms of articulation and just general modeling. If we want to add loops here and there, we'll be able to do that pretty easily. So this gets a little, hands are a little bit complicated, so try to keep things as simple as we can. I'm just going to shape this a little bit, just because I know generally what I want. I want a little bit of that muscle for the hand here, and I know that that's going to come up there. We're going to obviously need some more geometry, but let's just sort of round this out a little bit, and then while we're at it, we can come up here and sort of pull these knuckles up. We've got some bone under there, so we want to make that. We want to just sort of start by shaping it this way, and then we can add to it, modify it as we go. But if you work from general to specific, it's a good method for modeling, for anything really, but don't get too specific too soon. Alright, let's just round this out a little bit. We know that that's going to be rounded. So holding down the Shift key, we get access to our smooth tool when we have our sculpt tool selected. any of them. And we're going to round it out on the bottom too, just to make this less of a block. Okay, it's going to make this a little bit softer and give us a better idea of how this should shape, how the shape should look. All right, so sort of working back and forth. You can grab the Inflate tool and then just sort of billow that whole top surface up a little bit. It's going to be a little convex anyway. All right, that sort of helps us along. And we can do that down here a little bit too. Again, don't get too specific too quickly, but it is helpful to have the start of some of these bigger shapes, these bigger forms in place. All right, so I know straight off the bat I'm going to have another loop slice around here because I want to separate out sort of the pad of the palm right here. So Alt-C, let's go with a free mode, something like that. We'll probably add more to that, but for now I think that's going to give us a good start. We're going to sort of pull this up. Again, just sort of hinting around at that volume right now, that structure. Put another loop slice in the thumb right here, so Alt-C. And let's isolate that, double clicking it. And then let's smooth that out. So with that edge selected, hit Shift S. Okay, we get access to the smooth. We can sort of just right click, and you see how that just does what it does really nicely. It smooths it out. Saves us a little bit of sculpting work. We're going to do the same thing here. Dragging left and right. Alright, I'll go with that. And then let's just scale that in a bit. Let's see if we can also soften this up a little bit. So Shift, there we go. Oops, don't want those guys. So Shift S for the smooth. That's working nicely. Let's cut this up a little bit. We're going to have one bend and then the thumb about right there, and then this one is probably going to be closer to the palm, and we can just move this back into place. We're working with the selection action center, which is great because you can see it's aligning to the selection. Okay, so let's grab those edges and we can just sort of move that out, sort of. That's a good basic shape to work with. Let's take a step back and sort of evaluate the model a little bit, see how we're looking. I want to move this more, the tip of the thumb toward the fingers a bit more. Okay, so let's do that. We can do that with the flex tool. And I'm going to grab this gray bar, this gray ring around it, and that's going to get us closer to what I think that shape's going to be. I can add a little bit of a twist to it, which I think it's natural to do that. Okay, and just sort of adjust that as we go. Alright, so that's a good basic shape. Now I'm going to spend a little bit more time doing some shaping, and then we'll add a little bit more geometry, like around the joints, the joint here, and then that's the one that's going to be right there. Alright, so now that I've tweaked a little bit more on the geometry, I want to show you a couple things that I did. I haven't added any geometry, I just moved what we had around a little bit. But I want you to take note of a couple things before we start to add a little bit more geometry. So you can see right here at the joints, especially from a top view, as it comes into that little valley there. So I accentuated that a little bit on each of the joints, so you can see that it's more of a natural, it's a very small thing, but you can see it comes in a little bit. And that's really what you want to do. You want to, working with lower poly geometry, you can exaggerate that a little bit more. And we're going to add another span in between these joints like we have on the first digit. And then we're going to add a little bit more geometry to the thumb so that we can define that joint there. So let's do that. Let me just show you what I'm talking about. A couple of polygons right there. So Alt-C, and we're just going to cut that right down the middle on each of these. Doesn't have to be right in the middle, but might as well. What I want to do is to sort of shape this bottom pad and this, this top area into more of a, I'm going to have this little bow on the outside, not just a subtle little indication that there's some volume there, okay, but more so on the bottom. Okay, so let's just pull that out a little bit. You see how I've done that here on the first digit? I don't want to overdo it, but I do want that little indication of that area is going to come out a little bit. So it gives a little bit of volume to each of those digits. It's a subtle thing, but you can see maybe the difference between this one, this finger, and this finger. It's real subtle. Let me just exaggerate that a little bit. So it's more volume, it's more believable. I also want to probably pull this down slightly to create a little bit more volume on each of those digits. Let's just continue down the line, pulling those out. And when we pull those out, we can also pull these in. We can just sort of tailor that shape like we want it. Probably not a bad idea to help pull that in too. You can see I did that a little bit on some of these. So you can see that there's a little bit of volume that's there. It's sort of subtle, so you can exaggerate that a little bit if you want. I like to keep it sort of subtle like that. I want with a stylized character, I generally don't like to overdo the hands. Just sort of keep those simple or simpler. It's easy to do that though. It's easy to overwork an area, especially when you're having fun. Just kind of overdo it. Bring those areas in a little bit. Just those creases, just where it sort of makes sense, And then just constantly sort of change your angle so you can better evaluate what it is you're working on. Let's pull maybe these in a little bit, and maybe this out and in. You can see with working with raw polygon mode versus subdivision surfaces how much more accurate your topology will be, and you'll have much cleaner results when you go to subdivide or when you shift to subdivision surfaces. It's much easier to evaluate. I want that little bump there for the knuckle, but again, I don't want to overdo it. If they start to look a little too knobby, then you just pull it back a little bit. If the fingers are too knobby, it takes away from the feminine quality of the model, so keep that in mind. And also, see how I've raised the knuckles here, and they go back down into the hand. You can see that there's a hill here and there's a valley, hill, valley. Okay, so when you subdivide, you can see the start of that stuff happening. Okay, and you have better control over it. You can see it a lot better that way. I want to put an edge loop in there. So Alt-C, and then let's just sort of shape this into place. So Move tool. Just sort of even this out a little bit. Maybe push this a little back. Push this back a little further. Something like that. You can see I'm working sort of at, I'm trying to see the profile here. Okay, so again, just sort of move around the viewports. And smooth this out. This looks like a little bit too hard of an edge. A little bit of a flat area. So just work to smooth that out some. And that looks a little flat too, so we can sort of hit those areas holding the Shift key. We don't want to undo the work we did, but sometimes it's just a back and forth thing. That just looked a little bit hard to me. You hit Tab and you can see everything's starting to come together. All right, I might want to thin those tips of the fingers out a little bit more. I can do that in subdivision surface mode. Just sort of hit it back and forth, sort of like that. Just sort of tailor that to like you want it. We'll put fingernails on her in a minute, but right now we're going to get the structure right. I think the volume of this pinky needs to come down a little bit, maybe a little bit thinner. Such a small thing, but a lot of those small things can add up. So put another edge loop in here. So Alt-C just to sort of hold that end shape a little bit better. Okay, and then I'll probably just smooth it out somewhat. Holding the Shift key down, hitting that. Okay, I may go back and tweak it a little bit further, but let's move on to the thumb. Let's create this other joint. I'm going to select that, hit B for bevel, or round level of 2, and then just like we did with the fingers, let's find the, this is going to be where the nail bed is. So let's move our geometry into shape. We have more geometry on this thumb to work with, so it's not quite like what we were doing with the fingers. And the topology works well. It just flows right in there, so I'm happy with that. We want to remember the volume of that thumb. You can just sort of keep it simple. Think general to specific at first, and then you can always tighten stuff up later as you go and understand the shape or the form that you're working on. Pull this in a little bit. And then let's grab a couple of these edges and then just sort of push those back. So sort of maneuver that like that. Okay, so that's starting to work good. Let's put a loop slice in here because we want some volume to the end part of the thumb. And then we'll shape this area a bit more. We need to have another division right here, another joint, so B for bevel. I'm not going to do as many there, so let's just come down to 1. See where that gets us. I want to take that one, I'm going to slide that one. So right click on that and just slide that back. Let me cut this right around here. And I probably will move this back a little bit more. So slide that back. Alright, so with a little bit more refinement, I'm getting pretty happy with the hand how it is. I went back in and did a little bit more shaping to the fingers, the individual digits, just to give them their own sort of silhouette. You can see the hills and the valleys there. So I'm pretty happy with that. We're almost ready to create the nails, but what I want to do is to sort of go ahead and position this hand in place as per the reference drawing here. So just with the Y tool, I'm going to move this over into place and just see where we're at. Sort of general placement. Checking let's just pull back a little bit just to see. Now those hands look a little bit large on her. So, but that's not a problem. Let's just scale that down a little bit and see where we're at. Okay, I think that's pretty good. So you can see that it doesn't quite match up with the turn drawings, and that's okay. We've done that before where we use the turn drawings as reference. We're more sensitive to how the model looks in the 3D view. So that's really the priority here. So what we need to do is to pull those edges back up into the sleeve. So with a selection action center, just hit W and just move that back, something like that. Now obviously her arm is not that thin up there, so we can scale that. Shift S, which activates a smooth, and then just click and drag in the viewport a little bit. I'm just going to round that out somewhat. And I'll probably will scale her wrist in a little bit. So let's do that. Alright, pretty happy with that. I think we probably need to add a little bit more volume to the shirt, but we can do that. You can see that it's all pretty uniform going straight up, and there's going to be, with the forearm right here, we want to bring that out a little bit, so we need to do a little bit of adjusting to the shirt. Let's finish off the hand with a couple of loop slices in here. We probably want to tighten this wrist up here with a loop slice, so just maybe one right here, and we have a good loop around there. So Alt C, we'll put another loop slice in here, and for good measure we'll put another one about right there. So when we go to bend her wrist, we have a little bit more topology to work with. Okay, so we can always come back and add loops and massage those shapes a little bit more. See, it's a little bit straight right now, so while I'm thinking about it, let's just smooth that out just a touch so it's less blocky and it's integrated. The wrist is integrated a little bit more into the hand. Okay, I'm comfortable with that. Let's move on to the nails. So we're going to use the geometry from the fingertips to create the nails. So we only have to create one nail. Alright, so let's use that geometry. Let's select those polygons and then Command C to copy. Then hit N for new mesh layer. We're going to paste that geometry in here. We maximize this viewport so we can have a better look. Then I'm just going to use the thicken tool on those polygons, right click, and then just pull up the nail about like this. That's generally what it's going to look like in terms of thickness. But we can refine that a bit too. So let's grab those and selection action center, pull that up a little bit to create more of a little arc, and then we're going to tighten up the back of that nail. So Alt C, bring a loop slice close to that edge. You can see how that sort of tightens that up, and then we can do a little bit of shaping with our move tool. Sometimes I'll work in sub-D mode like here. This gives me a pretty good representation. It just sort of depends on what it is we're modeling. Y for the translate tool. Sort of move this over and sort of sink that nail bed in there a little bit. Maybe we'll pull that down. So move tool, and just sort of negotiate those points down into the mesh. Now I'm going to come back here to the hand and just subdivide so that, or hit tab so that we can see what it is exactly that we're working with, how those subdivision surfaces are being translated or interpreted rather, so we get a lot more accurate representation. And just sort of move this nail into place to where you're happy with it. So copy and paste. Again, with a selection action center, let's just reposition these fingernails. Alright, so now I've got the nails into place. You can see how they're sitting just like you would expect. I've sort of buried the end of the nail into the finger geometry just to create a nice little shape, nice little arc, and that's going to be totally fine for this project. If you have a couple of tight shots on your hands, you might want to have a little bit more definition or more integration into the fingertips, but I'm comfortable with this level of detail. So all we need to do now is just to mirror this left hand over to the right side. So hit Shift V, and we've got two hands.